My eloper just eloped. I'm hoping he went where I think he went. I might have to skip out. But I'm going to get us started. I hear him yelling. So first things first, I'm going to pull up the agenda. Forgive me. I'm still new at this. But Eldred, did you get a chance to look over? Oh, no, wait, public comment period. Is anyone here from the public who would like to comment? Okay.
Is Trisha, are you with us? Or is it Emily? Are you filling in today?
I'm filling in for Trisha today, Eldred.
Oh, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. So we don't have any public speakers signed up. Can we?
No, sir.
Is that it? All right. All right. Go ahead, Erin. What is next for us?
So next is approval of minutes. I mean, I looked them over. They look fine. Eldred, do you have anything?
I agree that they are close to perfect.
Okay. So Gladira, I mean, Kate, I am going to skip and just say, Kate, are you here for the duration? Gladira has waited patiently and her presentation is up, but is there anything that you would like to say now in case you need to leave as well?
No, I'm so sorry, Erin. I'm late because I didn't pay attention to the calendar and thought we were meeting at 5 and not at 4. I'm so sorry.
No worries at all.
So thanks for accepting me late, and I am available for the whole meeting. So you can have Gladira go since she's been so patient.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gladira. I mean, you know why we brought you here. So I'm just going to turn it over to you and please.
Thank you very much. So I am here to talk about certification. One of my jobs has been to provide guidance to the teachers that we're looking to recruit on how to apply for certification. And one of the things that we've encountered or prospective teachers have encountered is the difficulty if, let's say, they're a teacher who has certification in another state, then they are having to go through different hoops to get New York State certification. And so we also know, Cornell attracts a lot of traveling spouses who are veteran teachers, have taught in different states for many years. And in reviewing the certification process, New York State education certification process, there's a proposal I have in addressing legislators in Albany. And Emily, if you could share that one slide that I sent to you, please. All right. Okay. So the current problem that we're facing is shortage of teachers and critical in some areas. So special education, STEM, and what we've seen with some of the teachers we've hired. So for instance, there's a teacher that has certification in Virginia. He's now being asked to complete additional courses in order to receive New York State certification, New York State teacher certification. And I took some time and reviewed. So New York State education has, which I put a link there and I can also send it to you all. So it's a registration of curricula in teacher education. And it's basically the criteria that New York State Education Department uses to say whether a teacher prep program in another state is comparable. And so, legislators trust the process that New York State has gone through to produce great teachers. I mean, when you read this, if you go over the 5221 registration of curricula and teacher education, it goes through, all of the requirements that we require for a highly qualified teacher. And so what I would like to propose, and if this is possible, that there is a new pathway or an additional pathway that would allow teachers with certification from outside of New York to begin teaching in New York. And then in the meantime, they're, subject to the observation evaluation process by administrators, and then given a 5-year probationary period instead of a 4-year. So right now, the way the application process goes is there's an individual evaluation of their transcript. And in looking at the transcript, whoever the reviewer is could say, okay, well, their teacher prep program, I don't know, didn't give them enough data, and even though we also require, as part of the certification application process, we also require them to take the workshop. It's still one of the criteria that's reviewed in seeing if a program is comparable. If I'm understanding it correctly with the with this 5221, which is the link again I can send. So really seeing, okay, is there a pathway that will allow for the issuance of certification quicker, so that those that we're trying to recruit do not have to go through all these hoops. And then also too, it's a longer observation evaluation process, which would or could satisfy the need in Albany to say, okay, this is a highly qualified educator. And then also proposing, that there's specific professional development that we provide. So if in the, review of their transcript, there's deficiency in a certain area, then we can provide that as professional development. And another thing is to propose that, okay, that this be giving us a limited number. Okay, they allow maybe 5 types of certifications through this pathway, or 10. But this is a way that I could see, making the certification process easier, and also allow for some ease to recruitment where I've seen some challenges.
Thank you, Gladira. I have a couple questions just to start off. I mean, I think this is a great idea, and I think it's important. And I wonder if we can even have it expand to support staff, such as, we have a shortage of speech therapists and physical therapists and occupational therapists and behavior analysts. So, is this something that we can expand? And then I have a lack of knowledge here, and I'm glad Kate's here. I mean, does the certification also apply to nurses? We have a shortage of nurses. And then additionally, I'm thinking this is not just an Ithaca problem, right? This is a problem across the state, across the country. So I see this,
Right.
And both for Gladira and for Kate, I see this as something that we can bring up legislatively and through the school board. So I'd like to know, one, can this expand to more than just teachers? And two, we talk about doing this proposal. What is our best way of doing this and getting others on board and making this actually happen in a fast way, since we're basically in crisis when it comes to staffing?
So speech, I'll answer the easiest of your questions first, and then turn it back over to Gladira and to Dr. Brown on some of the more complicated educational questions. But on the certification question, Erin, speech language pathologists and nurses are actually licensed by the Office of Professions. They're not licensed by the New York State Education Department. So it's a completely different pathway. Changing their certification structure would actually require amendments to the New York State education law regarding the licensure of medical professionals. So that seems to me like definitely a heavier lift than the educational piece. So the source of the licensure requirements for teachers is actually not in any law. It's in New York State Education Department regulations. So there are longstanding regulations that just seem to get tougher and tougher every year regarding teacher certification and the pathways to teacher certification. So the way that those regulations came into existence is that the Board of Regents of the New York State Education Department is responsible for adopting regulations after a minimal period of rulemaking, where they provide for notice and comment to the public and all of that. So I would think actually that what occurs to me in terms of, and Dr. Brown may have other ideas too, but what strikes me as probably the easiest first point to move Gladera's proposal forward would be that we actually have a pretty good friend that is to the district that is the regent, who is Susan Miller. Susan is the regent for the Ithaca region, as well as, you know, the broader Finger Lakes region, but she has always been a very strong advocate for the district. She is the former president of the teachers union, so she has definitely that support from NYSED as well in her perspective, but she's very reasonable and has always been a great friend to the district. So I've always, in my dealings with her, found her to be somebody that is interested in just doing the right thing by kids and moving things forward that are going to be right for kids. And I know she is somebody that has spoken out really strongly about the difficulties in finding qualified teachers in New York State. So I would think that it might be worthwhile to invite her to the next Legislative Advocacy Committee meeting and, you know, vet this past her and ask her what would be the most, given that it is the Board of Regents that's responsible for adopting a regulation that would change the rules that are in effect right now, what would be the best way to lobby for that? Would it make sense for us to ask to be on the agenda for a Board of Regents meeting? Could we simply give her the materials and ask her to put it up for a vote and put a proposal on the table? Would it be worthwhile to have a meeting with SED Council, for instance, to have that discussion? Ultimately, though, the body that's going to be responsible for rolling out that change is going to be the Board of Regents. So I think that starting with our regent, who is, you know, elected and here to serve our region and schools within our region, would probably be the best first line of attack for that. What do you think, Dr. Brown?
Absolutely agree, Kate. You said it very well. I don't have much else to add. Susan is outstanding, and she can help us walk through this process.
Definitely.
I'm really pleasantly surprised and amazed that this would not be a legislative issue. So let's just stop there. And I'm happy. I agree with Aaron. This is certainly something to expend our energy on. Gladera, I have a couple of questions for you. Maybe one, I don't know, but this area is new to us, right? And we're not masters in this, but explain the difference between 4 years and 5 years. And why do you think that change would be essential to moving, to begin moving the pieces on the board? And I guess I do have a second question. Second question is, so we have a lot of traveling spouses coming in. Do you have any sense of what the turnover rate is? Do we also lose teachers because their spouses finish something at Cornell or want to move up the academic chain or do or don't get tenure? I just can't assume, having lived in this community for as long as I have now, that people who come with those spouses stay.
Yeah, so first question, difference between 4 and 5. The current probationary period is 4 years, and 5 years would just give that additional 1 year of where that teacher would get additional professional development, also more observations, more evaluations to really say, okay, this was a pathway that was created as sort of a shortcut. And so now we're giving that additional 1 year to prove to NICED, okay, they got the additional that would be then could be then said to be equal a comparable program to NICED's teacher prep program. And so giving that year, I don't know, it could be 2 years, but I think a year, giving an additional year is a fair amount of time.
So let me make sure, again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. We know, and HR definitely knows, and building leaders hopefully should know, whether or not someone is serving our kids by the end of that 4-year term. Given another year benefits the professional, but is that what we want to do for our little people? It almost feels like a jewel out the box. But again, I'm thinking through this. Doc, help me out. How does this benefit or hurt our chances to put the best people in front of the little people?
And ideally, I'm sorry, just to jump in real quick. Ideally, I think 4 years is sufficient. This is more like for the purposes of if Board of Regents were to say no, they need more preparation than a longer probationary period. You know, I hear what you're saying.
It's actually the case that it may be more complicated to also argue for the lengthened probationary period, because unlike the teacher certification rules that are only in the regulations, the probationary period is actually set in New York State law. So that would require an act of the legislature to make that change. So I would think that our best shot of getting this, you know, of advocating for this probably would not involve also including the tenure piece, because that would be a whole different review process that we'd have to go through and lobby the New York State legislature to make the change and all of that.
Yeah, this seems like one, if we want to get this done in our lifetime or before Aaron's children graduate from college, we should avoid the legislature.
Now, Eldred, we have had great success navigating the legislature to date. However, remember we've had two successful pieces of legislation for Ithaca, so we're not doing too badly in that regard.
This just feels different. Anyway, I need to hear our teaching and learning professionals' take on this.
So, you know, Dr. Brown mentioned, I think it was before Kate and Eldred were here, that Anna Kellis reached out asking what was on the list. It sounds like we don't necessarily need to put this part on, but I do wonder, and Dr. Brown and Gladir, I'd like to hear your opinion. I mean, it sounds like we can work through Regents for the teacher certification, but you know, if we're making this effort and we're carving these things out, I'm curious why we wouldn't go ahead, if we don't have to take the legislative route to do this, why we couldn't look at the other staffing component, and why we couldn't look at perhaps, okay, so we do the teacher certification via, you know, working with Regents and setting up a meeting with Susan, but what about those other staffing shortages? We have, like we've said, we have so many people flowing in through Ithaca, we have people, you know, through Cornell. You know, I talk to people on the playground who can't work here and would love to work at the schools that are therapists, but they can't because they're from another state and they have to go through all this recertification in New York, which takes lots of money and time. So even if this is something that would have to go through legislature and something we might be looking at for years, this was an issue before COVID, having a shortage of other staff. So can we get that ball rolling? Can we figure something out and carve that out and think of a way to word it and take it to Anna Kellis and start the process of advocating for certification for that other staff? And if we're looking at that to do that, I would love to explore what other barriers do we have. If we're looking at staff retention, if we're looking at certification, is there sort of a way that we can show a package and say, look at this, a one-pager to take to legislators and say, this is what we want to do. This is a crisis that's nationwide. We want New York to pave the way and say, look what we can do to make this better for our schools. So what do y'all think? Is that something that we can start the ball rolling on? Are there ideas on how to make that process start? Ideas?
I think it would definitely be multiple conversations and meetings. So I think the teacher piece would be definitely my suggestion for just the next concrete action step would be to invite Susan Mettler to one of these meetings, to our next meeting. And specifically to say that we'd like her help in navigating the Board of Regents process to identify additional pathways for certification for highly needed positions such as SPED and STEM fields.
Where is her office located, Kate? Is she still keeping a
Susan
local
has an
office?
office in Albany. Yeah. So she actually has an office in Albany. It's an official appointment. She gets paid for it.
But not here. She doesn't keep one here also.
I don't believe so. I think she has an office in Ithaca just in association with her consultant business, but I don't believe that she has an official Board of Regents office here. I think her her Regents office is in Albany. So I would think inviting her to us is probably the best course of action. In terms of the other medical, like nurses, speech language pathologists, and the other professions that are licensed by Office of Professions, my thought would be that probably a meeting with Anna would, like you said, Erin would probably be the next best step. She's really thoughtful. So my guess is that if we make that request, she'll immediately start liaising with the health committee, her health committee representatives to say, what are the potential barriers? My concern about those professions is that we don't have as much authority in that domain and as much voice because we are not the big, we're not a big interest when it comes to licensure of medical professionals. That's really the hospitals and the medical schools and the boards, you know, the examinations, and all of those are huge interests that regulate the licensure of medical professionals. And all of those interests spend a lot of money in staffing, you know, basically all of the assembly people that serve on, for instance, the health committee. So I would think that Anna would be able to get a read for us on whether there's any interest in that and what would be worth our while or not worth our while in terms of pushing back on that. But I think definitely scheduling a meeting with her to say, here is some of the impediments that we can see. I mean, something that I will say is that I have approached that with other representatives around the state to try to get better traction on reducing the bars for nurses. And one of the issues that sometimes comes up is that the legislators will basically say, well, this is just a problem for the schools because you guys don't pay enough. Your real problem is the nurses can go to the hospital down the street and make $20,000 more per year than working in education. Now, we would say, yes, because their job's a lot more cushy than working in a hospital, right? And there's a lot of soft benefits that come with that. But be that as it may, that's some of the pushback. Often I see that Carrie's getting on the Zoom, which is great too. We can get her read on it, but that's some of the pushback I've received whenever I go down that pathway. A lot of kind of the medical industry lobby will say, nurses get paid fine if they're in the private sector, if they're in hospitals, if they're, you know, working in medical offices. Your issue is just that you're not paying them enough in education. So if you want to recruit more nurses, there is no nursing shortage. You just need to pay them more. So I think we would have to be potentially prepared for that. And same with the speech language pathologists. If they open a studio of their own or they affiliate with you know, with a medical practice, they're probably going to make more money just base salary wise than if they come into a public school district. The benefit of working in a public school district, of course, is retirement contributions, health insurance, the fact that you have a defined work day of only 5.5 hours. I mean, there's a lot of benefits that make working in a school district a lot more valuable than working in the private sector. But the kind of common perception among medical professionals is that the reason that nurses don't gravitate to the education world is because we just don't pay them enough. So just throwing that out there, you know, is something that might be an issue, and that we might get pushed back on.
And that's interesting, Kate, because I think that that's changed. I know that, you know, if you talk to medical professionals now, there is a nursing shortage everywhere. So I think that if any time, now is the time. And I also have a lot of speech language friends from many different states. And that practice, it's a really tough, it's complicated because insurance companies make it complicated. So I think working for a school can be very alluring. But I mean, we're talking about out-of-state certification for this anyway, right? Like, and I think that's what we need to look at. There's a shortage in general. And if there's a shortage in general, and we talked to Anna Kellis about this, I think that, you know, working with other schools and working with other organizations, I think we're going to help each other benefit potentially here. You know, I think hospitals, speech, you know, therapy companies, everyone would benefit from this. I think there's potential for that.
In the past, Erin, the things that we have done here locally have had that pebble in the pond effect and have served other districts throughout the state, right? So I'm proud, as Kate said, that, you know, we've taken the lead on some hard stuff. Took a long time to get through, but once it got through, it wasn't just tiny town that benefited. But I'm still interested in hearing Doc's perspective on, you know, the extent to which this problem has come up with superintendents across the board. What you think about this split between the regents and then going to the legislature? What are you hearing out there? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as Aaron has expressed, it is a crisis. And as someone who's transitioned from the Commonwealth to this state, I recognize how difficult it is to become certified just in general, even for a superintendent. So this is an issue that's been building for years now. The negative narrative, the requirements, the negotiations have led us to this point where I thought, yeah, you remember, I said we would never be in this place. I was saying this 5 or 6 years ago. I can't imagine Ithaca ever struggling with this issue and it would be on someone else. It's now at our doorstep. So this is the number one issue when we talk as superintendents regionally and statewide. It is the one we need to put our thinking behind and the resources, i.e. Kate and Gladira, to think through how we parse it out and how we attack this pressing issue. I can't imagine what it will look like in the next 5 years. I don't see it getting better. It will only get worse. And if it's worse than what it is right now, it won't be us making a decision in a legislative action committee about whether or not we do something here, if you know what I mean.
Right.
This will be the issue. So we can get out in front.
All right. So then the question is, Erin, I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but, you know, thinking the logistical steps of how we've done this before. I think, Kate, you need to take a look at that proposal if you haven't already. And when you think it's ready, then we can certainly reach out to Sue and have her Zoom into our next meeting. Having sent her the materials, having sent her some thinking items beforehand, because I'm not trying to educate her in a legislative action committee meeting, and then get her thoughts on, you know, the severity, the crisis, does she get it? Is she willing to help, et cetera, et cetera. So how's that sound as a block and tackle plan?
I'm happy to, and Gladira, if you want to go ahead and just shoot me a copy of your presentation and proposal materials, then I'll work with you and give you any suggestions that I have that I think would just help streamline that proposal. And then I think that makes great sense to invite Susan Mettler. Maybe it makes sense for Dr. Brown to do the reach out just because you have a relationship with Susan, and she might respond more. She might respond quickly if she sees your name come up on her email, you know.
Thank you. She will respond. And
yes,
yeah.
She responds pretty promptly when she hears from Dr. Brown. So I think that might be most effective.
I'd also, when I email you, I'd also like to know your thoughts if we can add to that proposal, because ideally, as I'm recruiting and looking to diversify, should we just concentrate on teachers who are certified in other states or recent graduates who have gone through a teacher prep program in other states, and including that in that pathway? So
yeah,
I'm not sure.
That to me is probably a good question for Susan, because she'll have a better temperature on what's going to be most appealing or most likely to be able to make its way through the Board of Regents successfully. So I think that's a great question for Susan.
Okay. I'll put that.
And NISPA hasn't come up yet in this conversation. Do you think they could be allies in this, or is this I don't want to say above their pay grade, but
I
do they
think
deal with
I actually think
Regents issues as well?
they do, and I think it's actually consistent with one of their resolutions as approved by the resolution committee was to identify alternative pathways to certification in high needs
Okay.
areas. So it would
Okay.
definitely be consistent with their with their goals and objectives. So I would think that that would definitely be something that we would want to do. But I think we talked to Susan first, just because I think that's kind of the horse's mouth, so to speak, and we may get better guidance. She may say, FYI, there's currently a proposal pending that's going to be reviewed by Regents at the next meeting that gets you partway of where you want to be, and you might get better traction backing that as opposed to
Right.
coming up with a whole new proposal or something like that.
Right. That would be good. We'll
Yeah.
piggyback. We'll ride the camel. We just we want Ladera to be, bringing home these incredibly talented people, not having them sit on the sidelines, right? I've known people who have been here in that traveling spouse position, and they're running around trying to secure, jobs in daycare where they can do the 3 hours, and they're certified teachers in California and Texas and Florida. It's not right. It's not fair to our kids, right? It all comes back to how we serve young people, and that we need all hands on deck. All right, off the soapbox.
And Eldred, I don't have a number for you on that turnover rate, but I'll look into that. I don't have a number for you on that in terms of those who have left due to being like traveling spouses.
So I just before we move on to the next agenda item, so Gladera, you're going to work on the proposal for the teachers for Susan. Do we want to also kind of sketch something out to present to Anna Kellis as well about the medical professionals? Is that agreed on by the committee and Dr. Brown, or are we? Yeah. Okay.
Like that.
Yeah, she, like you said, she's brilliant. She's smart. She's our advocate. She's willing. She doesn't know as much about education as we do, but she's no slouch. I say, let's go for it.
Well, Gladera, thank you. Is there anything you want to add before? I mean, I don't want you to have to stay any longer. If you don't want to, you're welcome to, but is there anything you would like to add?
No, thank you very much for listening and allowing me the time to talk about this.
Oh no, thanks for coming. This is, honestly, I think this is at the top of our work this year. So thank you. Next on the agenda is the NISBA policy update. I let you folks know that I attended part of the meeting, but I was dealing with a pretty incredible family emergency. So I don't really have an update there. Kate, do you have an update from anything from that meeting?
On the on our new bill?
Well, no, the just basically the NISBA policy update in general. Because we missed last month's meeting, so the October voting meeting.
I don't typically attend the resolution committee meeting because I don't have a voice or a vote, and it's a closed meeting. So I do not have anything to report on that meeting. Were we able to vote by proxy? Do you know, Erin, or?
No, I mean, so I voted on the first couple of items, and then I literally had to deal with a family member in a hospital, and I had
I'm
to.
sorry to hear that.
It's all right. Everything's, kind of okay. So that's just kind of what happened, and that's kind of where we are.
How was it? It was probably the last thing on your mind, given everything else you were dealing with. But how did you find the experience? Was it pretty consistent with what we had shared in advance, or was there anything that struck you as surprising about it or anything else?
No, it was interesting. It's a meeting like that. As much as I am pro having these things online, it is a tough thing to do online. And it was very long to be sitting in, but it was effective, and the people, and there was voting and there was discussion. So it was interesting, and it was well done. But I wasn't really surprised by anything. No. Okay, I'll have to comb through and see if there's anything, and I've been meaning to do that, but again, it's been a fall. So we're gonna move up. This is exciting, and I'll let Kate take over for the medical database update, and Carrie's here if she wants to chime in as well.
Yep, so this is moving through the process. The last update I had heard was that they're fairly confident that this is going to be through in time for us to benefit from it in the next election cycle, or the next election. I'm sorry, you see what's on my mind. On the next immunization verification cycle. So Carrie, I think help is coming in this regard. I had sent, prior to our meeting today, I did send out an email to our representative, our counsel for the representative, just to see if they had any updates for us. And I didn't get a response, but the last email that I had was what I had forwarded to the whole group, saying that as far as they knew, everything was well underway, and they believed that all the concerns had been addressed to the satisfaction of the health committee, and that we were, well on our way to getting it approved. So fingers crossed. And then Aaron, while we're on the topic of updates, something else that I thought would be of interest also to the committee is that I know we've talked about advocacy on the issue of virtual meetings under the open meetings law. And I think at our last meeting, I had reported that there was actually an amendment to the open meetings law that authorizes virtual meetings through January 15th. The State Department of Health actually on Friday just issued new guidelines, basically recommending that every school district transition to virtual meetings until further notice, unless they can guarantee proper and effective mask usage by every single person that's in attendance, which I know if any of us are reading what's going on around the state, that's pretty hard for any district to guarantee right now. So all to say, I'm guessing from that given that we're now halfway through the month of December, it's pretty likely that that open meetings law, virtual meetings authority will be extended, given that the governor has now just given a directive that everybody transition to virtual meetings, even if you aren't doing it already. So I'll obviously keep you posted if we get any further updates on that, but it seems like if I'm looking at a crystal ball, I would predict that that will be extended.
Thank you. That was next on the agenda. So that that kind of transitions us into, I guess, my next question. If we're talking about the open meeting law, is I believe this is something. I mean, I imagine this is something that's already on Anna Callis's plate, but I think this is something when we do talk to her, we should put up. I mean, we have a temporary solution for it. Ideas, Dr. Brown or Kate, about how we even, if this is something we need to advocate for, or is it kind of already in the works that when this pandemic is over, or when the urgency of the pandemic is over? Because I don't think the pandemic is ever going to be over at this point. I mean, is this something we need to put on our agenda, or is this something that's already on everyone's plate?
In terms of making the dispensation for virtual meetings permanent, Aaron?
Yeah, like making sure that the hybrid option is available and something that is just part of open meetings law.
So I would think right now the focus is definitely from a legislative standpoint on that provision in order to ensure safety during the pandemic. I think addressing it as a permanent solution at this point is going to it's just not going to land on the right ears, I don't think, because the priority of everybody is addressing that issue as a pandemic related accommodation. So I would think that that's something that we wait. I think we wait and see what's going on with the January extension. And if and when it looks like the provision is going to expire and not be extended, that's when we would double down on our legislative advocacy efforts to try to make it a permanent part of the open meetings law. And then I think that the justification would be framed a lot differently than how it's currently being framed. It's being framed totally as a health and safety related measure right now. We'd want to frame it in terms of increasing participation and representation in local government, facilitating quorums, facilitating public participation in board meetings, et cetera. So the talking points around it, I think, would be very different than they are right now. And I worry that those talking points would just get very lost, given that the focus is very much on the pandemic related issues right now.
Yes, so when we do come, when we do come back to that, I'm sorry, I'm just taking notes here. It's facilitating quorums, public participation. It is ensuring equity and participation, but also in who can be a part of these committees, who can actually, I mean, more just, who can actually be on a board, who can be a part of these things. And it's also, calling out the ableism in having open meetings only available in person. Okay, so equity, participation, ableism. Okay, next up for our last few minutes on the agenda are school lunches. I don't think there's much to actually talk about in regards to this. It's more of bringing in a guest for another meeting. And I mean, given the urgency everywhere else in the world right now, I mean, I do think that this is important. Do you think that we can bring someone into another meeting, our next meeting, or what meeting do you think we should bring this into the conversation?
We've been talking about this for a minute. My folks would be ready and willing to come to the next meeting if that's what the board chooses. So yeah, for us, I wouldn't mind having a conversation earlier than later anyway. And we have some cool, exciting grants that are coming our way too, that maybe give us opportunity to plug. So maybe our next meeting, or if not the next one, then the one shortly thereafter.
That sounds fantastic. And I want to share a personal anecdote ahead of that, and I'll share it in the next meeting probably as well. My son just had his well visit, and the doctor asked what he gets because they get free lunches and they don't want my lunch. And when he'd said that he gets chocolate milk or juice, the doctor was literally like, what? You shouldn't drink either of those things. Those are terrible for you. And it was really eye-opening because we serve so much of that. So I think this is an important conversation to have and see how we can support our food service staff. Okay, so it is 4:53, looking at the agenda again. Action items assigned. So it's Dr. Brown, it's you talking to Susan, and who is going to invite food service then for our next meeting?
I'll take care of
I'm
that.
happy. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, we've been asking to have them come so you can get the history again, Erin, on how far we've come and where we are and what the last legs are. But yeah, I think in my opinion, we're talking about that last tough 15%. Right? She's transformed what those kids eat tremendously. But yeah, as someone with a family history of glucose, I get what you're saying about the sugar-inspired drinks and chocolate milk.
Right.
Is that a TV on in the background?
That's mine. My kids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
Sorry, I gotta babysit them somehow. No, and I want to be
Oh, I
clear.
hear you.
I don't find this is an effort to support food service, not to knock down their hard work. It's supporting them in their work. So our agenda for the next meeting is set. Is there any new business or anything we want to do before we adjourn?
We have accommodations next. Real quick, do we have a list for Anna? Do we have a list that I can give to Anna? Would I take what we talked about tonight and give that to Anna? Is that what y'all?
Yeah, I have notes and I'll email that to
Cool.
the team. Yeah.
So
you.
Doc, you're reaching out to Anna and Susan. Is that what I'm taking away?
I was reaching out to legislative action. I'm food service folks. Now, Susan, I guess I am reaching out to her. Yeah, thank you, Kate, for telling me that one. I'll reach out to Susan Mittler too, and I'm asking her to come to a future meeting, but not the next one. I guess maybe let me be clear. What am I inviting Susan to do?
I think that can be a meeting. I mean, given her stature, right? Let's figure out a time. It doesn't have to be a meeting necessarily. It could be a separate meeting, right? If we want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can work with what works with her.
We'll block a significant amount of time. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes. This is gonna be a conversation that's I don't want to say long overdue, but it's gonna be important. Yes. So that's Susan and Anna Kellis. Who's reaching out to her?
I mean, I can, Dr. Brown, if you would like,
Please,
and I'll
go for
copy
it.
all on it. Okay, yeah.
All right, I think we have marching orders.
I-
And when it's
I got a
time to
recommendation.
connect with NISBA, I'm happy to take that on.
Okay, well then, we got commendations, so I'm gonna say meeting adjourned, and thank you, everybody. See you soon.
All right.
Have a great
bye.
night,
Bye,
everybody. Thank
Glendora.
you.